Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers on March 8, 2018. All managers are present. Is there a member of the public who wishes to address the board on a matter that is not on our agenda or that is on the consent agenda? No hands. Next item is approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. On the consent agenda this evening, we have approval of the February 22nd, 2018 board minutes and two resolutions, 18017, approval of continuing the MCWD USGS agreement for joint funding of the gauge station, and resolution 18-018, authorization to transfer $112,020.52 from the 325 Blake Road capital account to the 325 Blake Road operations account. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Manager Rodman, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton, those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? For our president's report, I would like to say that on the next meeting on the 22nd, we will schedule executive committee to meet at 6:30 with the auditor, and in that instance it'll be Manager Rodness, Manager Shackleton, and Manager White, so we'll get that on the notice that meeting. Since the last meeting, I attended the joint working group on 325 Blake Road and the Southwest LRT Community Works Blake Road Subcommittee meeting, along with Manager Miller and Loftus and Manager Miller, respectively. And I know that we'll be getting a report from staff. I won't go into the substance of that, but I did want to point out my observation that it was a great example and a perfect representation, I think, of our balanced urban ecology policy with partners and land and water use planning together and a focal geography. I attended the MOD meeting yesterday as a board member there. Dues are still a consideration, and making sure that the dues are justified and carrying through on the strategic plan. We received agency reports. Bowser and MPCA talked specifically about really pulling themselves into a working relationship. The Clean Water Council reports that their policy statements this year will be on pharmaceuticals and chloride. We got a legislative update. I know that Manager Rodness also attended the legislative breakfast this morning, so I'm going to defer to you, Manager Rodness, for a rundown on those legislative items.
The tax and funding issues that have been addressed by MOD include some of the following: modify and increase the general fund level limit for all non-metro watersheds. I think you'll see a sort of a rural shift on some of these issues. Advocate for statutory clarification to allow broader use of levy funds with new state sources of public funding. Support increasing the general fund levy limit for the Middle Fork Curl River Watershed District. And that's something that you had a comment on?
The non-metro districts have a very severe levy limit of $250,000.
Oh, that's right.
So in order to do multi-year projects or work with grants or just do bigger projects, they'd like to see that increase to $500,000.
There's one interesting item for consideration, and that was increase per diems for managers from 100 per day to, or from 75 per day to $100 per day. And I think that's primarily championed by the rural contingent as well. Monitor and act on any changes to enforcing funding for the buffer law. So the buffer law continues to be something to fight about. And there was support for monitoring Bowser bonding legislation that affects the funding for the bonding bill. Policy issues that have seen given a higher priority are amending an open meeting law to allow electronic meeting participation by Watershed district managers. And that sounds, you know, like cutting down on the time that people drive to the various meetings. Protecting the integrity of Clean Water Council appointments from undue influence by state agencies. I don't know where that's coming from, but advocate for coordination and integration of state watershed programs with local watershed implementation, and monitoring and acting on any buffer law updates and changes. So those are the primary points of interest, and we were given the charge to take these up with as many of our legislators as we can.
Thank you. Two other things to note. The $22 million that had been taken out of clean water funds for implementation of buffer, so soil and water conservation districts, was replaced because of the budget surplus at the state. So that came back into the clean water fund. And there's likely to be a chloride bill soon. I think they're lining up sponsors for that bill to provide some immunity in exchange for training of salt applicators. Mr. Whisker.
I believe it was introduced today. That's
Oh.
what Joe Carlson let us know.
Excellent, thank you. I didn't follow that.
That's more of an urban issue, is it not?
I think that there was some concern in the Red Basin also, Red River Valley.
Oh, okay.
I'm not real sure about that. Okay, Operations and Programs Committee report, Manager Loftus.
Thank you, President White. We don't have any motions or recommendations for the full board this evening, but I can let you know that we did a good job following the agenda and received updates from staff on all the items listed. Everybody here was in attendance. We finished on time. Overall, we did a very good job. Nothing to report back other than President White, Manager Miller, and I will, I believe, be meeting after the regular board meeting to continue the HR plan discussion with our new administrator, Mr. Whisker. Otherwise, all the discussion items are as they appeared and were informative updates from staff.
Thank you. The upcoming meetings and event schedules listed in the program, in the agenda rather. Manager Rodness is attending the CEC committee meeting next week, and I will be attending in April.
There's the answer.
Excuse me?
So there's the answer to my question.
Aha. Then let's move to item 11.1, Resolution 18-015, Michael Heyman.
Good evening, Chair White, managers. Speak loudly. Before you this evening to discuss the resolution 18015, which is authorization to execute agreement with NTH for real estate brokerage services for 325 Blake Road. A little bit of background or a little bit of information on NTH and the role they'll play. They will essentially act as a real estate broker as part of our land team in partnership with our legal counsel, which is Laura Graff at Dorsey Whitney, and our appraiser Bob Shakota Shanahan. That's sort of been our long-standing land team that we continue to use for purposes of land conservation and land planning. They'll be our lead consultant and have been acting as our lead consultant through the RFQ process. They're currently under contract with the board on a short form work order to help with the RFQ process review, so evaluating some of the RFQ submittals, the responses, and helping to formulate, as we advance, the supplemental information request. They're working on scoring criteria that will help sort of create an objective analysis of what information we receive moving forward, as well as we're already in talks about formulating the interview process, what that looks like, what some questions will be. So that's some of the ongoing work that they're doing that is included in their current proposal that's before you this evening. In addition to that, moving forward, they will also be our lead financial analyst as we move towards sale or some sort of transfer of the property. They'll conduct all of our negotiations on behalf of the district and do all the additional implementation or documentation as necessary. Of course, dependent upon what type of document we're talking about. If it's the purchase agreement, that's obviously drafted by Laura Graff and Darcy Whitney, but on advice and counsel from NTH, dependent upon terms and how the negotiations have transpired. So just giving a couple examples in terms of monitoring due diligence and helping us start closing process. Just a little bit of background about NTH. They are a reputable and well-respected firm in the Twin Cities. They worked on some of the most recent large transactions that have been occurring in Minneapolis, and are really well-versed in both private and public sectors, which I think is pretty unique, or at least for us, that's going to be a unique characteristic that we're very interested in as we sort of transition with our site and the continued nature on our property that's going to require sort of a joint partnership in perpetuity, essentially, with the goals that the district has set forth for the property. And as I noted earlier, they are currently our president advisor, so they do have a really strong understanding and background of not only this site, but what we've been doing with the Greenway, and just some of the vision that the city has set forth, and the surrounding community and region of the Southwest Subcommunity of Hennepin County. The fee structure is set up, and we've talked about this at the committee on a couple occasions, where we would have a retainer. It would be paid over a 5-month period. It's likely, almost inevitable, that obviously the work will not be done in terms of the pre-planning. We likely won't be ready to close on the property at the end of that 5 months, at which point they remain committed to the project based on the success rate, which is fixed fee success rate. So we're actually projecting it's likely more of a 12 to 18 month process. The retainage is paid over the first 5 months with their continued involvement being based on that fixed fee. So the reason that we had sort of migrated originally, I know a lot of the conversation, or some of the conversations surrounded the commission-based fee, and we moved towards a fixed fee, mainly to talk a little bit or reserve some of that objectivity that we really want. We don't want it to be driven, or the purchase or the sale of the property to be driven solely on price. We want there to be a strong component that ensures that the developer fits the vision and sort of has the characteristics that we're looking for to ensure that the site is successful in the future. We felt that was probably the best structure to do that. So this evening, staff is recommending the board managers authorize the administrator to enter into the agreement with NTH for broker services for 325 Blake Road in an amount of $220,000, with $175,000 of that payable at the time of closing on the site. Happy to answer any questions.
Manager Shackleton has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Manager Miller. Are there questions for Mr. Heyman? We were able to meet, the joint working group met the 2 individuals from NTH at the joint working group meeting, and very impressed with them. So, any other discussion? Ready to vote? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 11.2, Resolution 18019. Mr. Heyman again.
Thank you, Chair White. Chair and managers, before you this evening to discuss the RFQ process to date and request approval that we advance respondents into Phase 2 of the 325 Blake Road request for qualifications process. I want to give a little bit of background on the RFQ process to date. So we released that RFQ on December 18th, 2017. We had about a 2-month window at which we were looking to provide potential development teams to develop their responses. Hosted an informational meeting in early January, which was well attended, and then had a deadline for submittals of February 14th, 2018. Just a couple highlights with the RFQ itself. Obviously, it's it was essentially 4 parts. We wanted to get a lot into on the front end about the objectives, our guiding principles, the community objectives, and sort of how the site fits best within the region and some of those goals, and then give the background information on the site and the work that had been done to date, whether it's geotechnical or environmental work. Talk through the response content, which is really what we'll be focused on this evening, give those requirements to the development community, and then highlight some of the contracting that we anticipate moving forward, similar to what NTH will be working on, whether it's a master development agreement, future acquisition, and so on. The RFQ was commonly referred to as sort of an RFQ heavy because it wasn't specifically a request just for qualifications. It did talk about vision for the site, financial wherewithal, and sort of provided an opportunity for respondents to put a vision out if they so decided, in the sense of giving a little bit of an idea of what they might want to do with that site and how it would integrate with the district and city's vision. On the 14th, we received 6 responses. You have information in your packet that sort of contains the high-level overview from each of the respondents: Anderson Company, Dorn, Anderson, LMC, Lace, and Sherman. You also have in your packet a selection process that was sort of set forth, and I want to talk a little bit about that. It's really been a continuation of the partnership we started with Hopkins and Hennepin County with the early implementation roadmap that we undertook in 2015. And then, of course, carried that through the RFQ development, at which point the Southwest Subcommittee became another strong advisor to the district and the city in that process. So we wanted the selection process to really carry forward a lot of that work that had been done previously to ensure that we had strong, sort of strong connection with all of our partners. We, excuse me, the process was essentially developed originally to evaluate and move towards interviews. And we've been working with the Joint Working Group and the Southwest Subcommittee to sort of envision how that might change, which is a little bit about the discussion tonight, or not even change as much as just a brief sort of pause and modification to request a little bit more information. As I noted in your packet, there is an overview of responses. It's essentially a tracking table that we've been utilizing from the staff review process on. The front page has sort of the overview of each of the development proposals, or they're not even proposals so much as the responses and some of the vision, financial components that we had requested. As expected, the responses were pretty wide-ranging in terms of the points that they hit on. Some were stronger with discussions about their vision or what they would anticipate putting on the site versus experience or financial wherewithal. So the approach to the evaluation, what we wanted to carry through each group that was reviewing, was sort of a qualitative-based ranking, looking at the 4 criteria of experience, financial components, vision for the site, and just the overall quality of the response. And we did that with sort of an excellent through unsatisfactory ranking, and you'll note that within your table. And this all kicked off with the staff evaluations. So there was a staff committee that focused initially on completeness and consistency, making sure that they met the criteria that was laid out in the RFQ with those 4 components in mind, and then provided a ranking or a score, if you will, the statement as to what the staff felt for each one of those criteria, and concluded at the end of our discussion that we felt 5 of the 6 responses warranted additional information requests. Because of some of the variation in them, it would be helpful to understand a little bit more about what particular development teams may be thinking prior to moving into interview and potential negotiations. With that, the Joint Working Group was then asked to review, and actually they were asked to review absent of the staff evaluation that was sort of held in the background. Staff noted to them that all were complete and should be reviewed. And again, the Joint Working Group reviewed in the same manner that staff had and met to deliberate on those, and agreed and concurred with the staff evaluation that 5 of the 6 respondents made sense to enter into a supplemental information request to get a little bit more information prior to moving on in the process. And so the last step that we've conducted today prior to this evening was last Friday. We went to the Southwest Community Work Subcommittee, and that subcommittee, as I noted earlier, is comprised of a variety of our partners who helped us through various steps in the process, whether it was early implementation on through the RFQ. We provided them with the RFQs for their review, and then at the meeting itself, we gave a high-level overview of the document that's in your packet is what was provided. We stepped through that, talked through some of the pros and cons of each, and answered any questions. I note that they're generally in agreement because they had some really great feedback about the level of discussion we may want to invoke through that supplemental information request, to what detail we might want to go, as well as the value in maybe carrying more into an interview, and that in some instances they've had some experiences that seem to benefit by having a few more developers in their cities when they've interviewed more and just received more information or felt that was a little bit more beneficial. So with that, we're going to continue using the Southwest subcommittee to not only provide input as advisors for the supplemental information request, but figure out how they may participate in that interview process, because it is I think a strong committee with a vast experience in redevelopment. We provide some additional advice to the district. So again, they concluded similar to the joint working group and staff that it made a lot of sense to continue in the direction of a supplemental information request, which is essentially gets into a little bit more detail like you would with the request for proposals. Not quite that heavy. We're looking at something that will be it won't be too cumbersome on the developer, more just to clarify some of the statements that they may have made in their request for qualifications, talk about their alignment with the vision, whether it's units they project on the site or how the creek or greenway may fit, talk through some assumptions or contingencies that may be relevant with their response, whether there's anything that would remove them from contention on their own will if they say that if Southwest Light Rail doesn't go, they're not interested in the site, would be an example of something that would be for further consideration. And then just ability to perform and figuring out how, what other jobs they may have in queue, what they might be working on, how this might phase out with their plans, and how we may end up at negotiation for a transaction or acquisition. So the 5 recommended respondents that we would advance are Anderson Companies, Doran, Kraus Anderson, LMC, and Sherman, based on their responses. I did want to talk a little bit about the place response, because we are suggesting that they maybe fall off. And I would say they did describe a vision for the site and a community engagement process, which were 2 criteria that were obviously referenced through the RFQ process. Unfortunately, they lack or seem to lack experience based on their response in terms of their ability or to demonstrate ability to deliver a site of this size. They don't have comparable developments locally or even nationally in terms of the scope, scale, and size that we're looking at, which was one of the concerns that was raised at both the staff and joint working group level. There's some uncertainty on the financial structure and how some of that might work in order for them to move in and work on the site, how that timeline might look, and they'd be able to phase it based on a local project that they actually have underway in St. Louis Park. And so with that, it was decided, or the suggestion or recommendation to the board this evening is that they would fall off as the group that maybe just doesn't have the experience and qualifications to advance at this time. So I just want to highlight briefly the RFQ schedule, and essentially where we are, obviously the March 8th, so we're now looking at this area below. In the original schedule, we had set that out for the next few weeks to be interviews and develop a recommendation. Based on the feedback we've received and the evaluations both from staff, the joint working group, and the Southwest subcommittee, we're looking at modifying the schedule slightly, and this works just fine with our original schedule in terms of trying to meet any sort of grant deadlines and other processes that we're trying to maintain. We would essentially move into this supplemental information request and finish developing those questions and provide a couple of weeks for the developers to provide a response to those questions, at which time we would consider responses and then advance towards, after meeting with the joint working group and subcommittee, a subset potentially, or maybe all 5 would move in towards that, to the interview process prior to the joint working group deliberating and creating suggesting a recommendation to the board for a final developer. So this evening, the recommendation from the joint working group and staff is that the district proceed with 5 developer candidates at this time and initiate the supplemental information request. That staff will work with NTH and continue working with advisors of the joint working group and Southwest subcommittee to continue the process.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 18019?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus. Are there questions for Mr. Hayman? Manager Miller?
I don't have any questions. First of all, I think the quality of the responses have been just superb. I'm probably the most experienced amateur observer of development on the board here, at least. But you know, I've had two fields of civic and public involvement in development over the last few years. I won't say how many. You know, I chaired the State Housing Finance Agency. I sat on this Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. I sat on the City Planning Commission, the City Council, and in civic venture, I was chairman of the 20-year revitalization program for this in the city, and I sat on GIMIC for 30 years, and I was chairman of the United Way Housing Committee. So I think I got a perspective of viewpoints anyhow, and I really think that we're doing this right. We're doing it with the right partners, and I feel incredibly comfortable that we're cautious enough, and we're going to end up with the quality that we're looking for, because this is it's a great site, but we have to make sure that that our potential partners understand the complexity of the vision that we've got. That we want a high quality project, and yet we want to integrate the neighborhood and the natural environment in this site. So I think extending this time frame is really a good idea, so that everybody gets the same level of excitement about the potential for the development here, and I think it's going to be well worthwhile. So I want to commend the staff. I spent 30-some years in public finance as a professional, and you fellas, you folks, the whole bunch, sorry about that, the folks have really acted as professionals in this thing, that you would not know that you were in the natural resource business. You think you were in the community development field, and you've really done a very good job of bringing all the partners together. Appreciate the work.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move to item 11.3, Resolution 18-020. And we have Ms. Clark and Ms. Quinn.
Thank you. You didn't have to say that out loud.
But you heard it,
Yeah, I
right?
heard
The mic's not supposed
it.
to.
None of them work, so it's, yeah. Let that be the.
Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. This evening, staff are requesting board action on Resolution 18-020, authorization to execute a memorandum of understanding with the City of Shorewood to coordinate the planning of water resources in the city's capital improvement plan. The board has been briefed on this MOU to coordinate land use and water planning in the City of Shorewood, both at the committee meeting on December 21st and 2017, and then as a discussion item at the board meeting on January 25th. So I will be providing a recap summary, kind of walk you through how the MOU aligns with the district's organizational strategies and goals. As identified in the district strategic alignment plan, outlines two high-level initiatives to achieve our mission of protecting and improving land and water resources. being to develop high-impact capital projects that make positive changes within the watershed, and to change the land use policy environment to increase early value-added partnerships with private development and public infrastructure. While the district focuses in areas of highest need as a priority, we also are committed to staying responsive district-wide. And the MOU and the partnership with the City of Shorewood provides an example of early coordination and the opportunity to create a documented and repeatable process for proactive and responsive planning. So just kind of as a recap of where we're focusing with the city, it's primarily in the western portion of the City of Shorewood, which is west of Excelsior, north of Highway 7 there. The city approached the district having identified a kind of a suite of issues that came to their attention through localized flooding and citizen concern, and have been identified being from high groundwater tables, some ditches that need some maintenance, and poorly functioning infiltration system.
Thanks, Mike. All right. So the benefits of entering into the MOU really outline clear expectations for both the district and the city. And for this particular MOU, the city will be leading the development of the systems plan, including strategies, the prioritization of the plan, and funding plan for the work, while the district will provide technical assistance, a regulatory framework, may be able to assist in seeking grant funding. And if there is an opportunity that presents itself, there may be a potential for partial funding if prioritized within our CIP, or possibly cost share funding once that program is developed.
Can I ask a question?
No, I'll hold your question, please.
And so kind of just summarizing again, the benefits that the district sees with this early coordination and co-planning with the city is really streamlining that regulatory process, which saves everybody time and money. Local resource planning improvements that are done by our partners, and kind of really overall just better water resource outcomes. So really looking at kind of a strategic resilience model, taking into account, you know, the economic, the natural resources and the social, bringing those all together, and having an output that's a built natural environment that not only benefits the citizens but also the natural community as well. And then once again, managing those expectations. So in conclusion, the City Council approved this MOU at their meeting at the March 26th meeting. Upon board approval to enter into the MOU with the city, staff will gather and analyze existing technical data and modeling. We'll be working with WANC to help us analyze that data and identify opportunities for natural resource improvements. Upon those recommendations, the city then will lead the development of an implementation plan and their priorities, and kind of in a similar parallel track with that, we'll be providing a regulatory framework and how they can implement those. And that concludes my summary of the MOU with the City of Shorewood.
Thank you. Manager Miller.
How much does this parallel our agreement with Victoria?
I'm sorry, Manager Miller, could you repeat yourself again?
Does this parallel our agreement with Victoria?
Mr. Wesker.
Where's this button to talk?
You do?
Okay, I'm still learning. Manager Miller, managers, the agreement has some parallel with the City of Victoria. They're all a little bit unique. This one's really focused on aligning our water resources improvements with road reconstruction, some park improvements, some very specific known targeted improvements that the city's looking to make. The MOU that we developed with the City of Victoria is more vision-based and more global for the whole city. It didn't carve out how we were trying to integrate into any specific project. It just talked about the working relationship the City of Victoria and the district were looking to develop.
The Victoria agreement seems to have more long-term benefit. Then this is kind of like responding to just current needs. Is that correct or not?
Well, I think that's correct, but that's, that's part of our strategy and tactical approach. With the City of Victoria, we were looking to engage in the 6-mile Halsted Basin watershed, that whole 27 square miles, for a prolonged period of time to deal with 14 lakes, 7 of which are impaired. So we needed to proactively develop a partnership and a planning arrangement with the City of Victoria. Part of our whole comprehensive plan approach is how do we remain responsive to other community needs, by providing technical assistance, being involved, guiding their projects so that they can get their projects accomplished faster, cheaper, and integrate natural resource benefit with decreased reliance on just district grants or capital funds. So yes, we're responding to a request from the City of Shorewood. What we're really looking to do is, when the cities come to us in the past with a project that's at 90% design needing a permitting, it's pretty difficult to solve water resource issues at that time, or when they have a development and then has problem issues with groundwater. So when the City of Shorewood approached us this time and looking for specific assistance, we took a step back and said, let's look at all the things that the city has on the slate for the next 5 to 6 years, your entire 5 to 6 year road improvement plan, what you're looking to accomplish with your parks and open space master plans, investments in city campus, and how do we solve some of the drainage and water quality issues through your projects, looking out over 5 to 6 years versus just responding one project at a time. So we are responding to their need, but I think we're doing it in a way that's more systems approached, where we can guide them and work in partnership with them for how they're solving some of their own problems and managing expectations. Quite frankly, it's much more difficult when they're coming to us with a finished product asking for grant funding or for us to participate through our capital improvement program after they've developed a project for a long time without our assistance. So yes, we are responding and it's more reactive, but that's sort of by design.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 18020?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Becker. Any further discussion or questions? Manager Loftus.
This might already be intended to happen, but I would ask Wank to just assign a separate project ID or however you track it. When you say technical assistance, we're committing to more than just in-house technical assistance in this MOU. We're committing consultant dollars, which are out of pocket. So I just would like to be able to, when we analyze whether this was worthwhile, be able to quickly pull those dollars as, I guess, a little bit of evidence to the City of Shorewood of what we've contributed, not only on in-house time, but out-of-pocket dollars. Thanks.
Right, that's something that we will do and already do. Any expenditures over $5,000 on a project like this, you're going to see and approve. Otherwise, it's just going to be Wank's time at meetings. The city's retained its own engineering consultant, so you'll see those as they come in.
Thank you. Other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, Ms. Quinn. We'll move to item 11.4, Resolution 18-021. Eric Filzek.
Thank you, President White, managers. Here tonight, looking for approval of the design scope with Wink Associates for the support the 6 Mile Creek Halsted Bay Habitat Restoration Program. I'll provide a brief recap of the work plan overview we gave at the February 22nd PPC meeting. Mention again let's start with Sam's funding recommendation and budget, then talk briefly about the scope in front of you. At the last PPC meeting, we talked about our carbon management strategy. The goal here is to restore over 2,400 acres of deep and shallow lake and lake habitat through common carp management, so adult biomass removal, controlling the carp spawning through aerating 6 shallow lakes, and installing barriers in strategic locations to prevent movement to carp nurseries and to assist in removal. And through that, we've identified, a need to obtain some access easements for the aeration units and for the barriers to maintain them. And that's a little bit what we're talking about tonight. So to recap again, our grant award that we've been recommended for through Star SAMS was $567,000. If you recall, the grant was very implementation heavy, so we focused very much the grant dollars on the implementation, so the barrier installation, running utilities, removal contracts, and we focused our match more on the soft cost, personnel, removal, monitoring equipment, aeration units, the design services, and then, like I already said, staff time. So that's kind of how we framed the grant to make it more attractive, being as our first go around with Star SAMS. This is just showing again our implementation schedule and how it's very much front-loaded on the implementation, getting the barriers in the ground by end of 18, which is why we're looking to get this design scope approved now, so we can get everything ready to go by July 1. The dollars come in and get things implemented by 18. So the design scope that Wink put together will go through the easement work that's needed for the barriers and aeration. District staff will be working individually with some particular landowners on cooperation on that aspect, and Wink will be putting together the work that's needed there. And then the design for the 4 barriers, including like the site review, soil borings, interim design work up to 60%. At that point, we'll come back to the board for a check-in, and then from there, move into final design. They'll provide shop drawings and help with procurement and construction oversight of the barriers. Their fee estimate for this work was $74,865. That covers the design work. And again, this is just the schedule for design. Achieve 60% by end of June, so we can get barriers implemented in the ground by end of 18. And there's the one structure at South Lunston won't actually start design until January of 19. So with that, take any questions.
First, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus, your question, Manager Olson.
I just wanted to make a comment that over the past 6 months, I've been hearing comments from everybody, folks at the Lake Association, City Hall, County Commissioners. Everybody's in support of your plan. Everybody's in support of the way you're going about doing it and funding it, and it's just a tremendous positive attitude toward everything we're doing here. So congratulations.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Fieldset? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 11.5 is Resolution 18-022, financing for Farmville Circle acquisition. Mr. Whisker.
I have permission to present from this chair.
Indeed.
Chair White, managers, the information's, I think, summarized fairly well in your packet, and we reviewed the financing in the Operations Committee this evening, so I don't anticipate there being a lot of questions. But to summarize, back in May of 2017, the board approved Resolution 17038 to enter into a land acquisition agreement with the Three Rivers Park District, where Three Rivers Park District would be acquiring or seeking fee title ownership for about 6 parcels, 8 acres total, right at the mouth of where Six Mile Creek discharges into Halstead Bay. We'd looked at, through that transaction, if Three Rivers was able to close, subdividing off a subset of their 8 acres, around 4 acres, for purposes of the water treatment facility, Allen Dosing facility, that location. You've seen the plans and everything for that in the past. The resolution approving that acquisition agreement with Three Rivers stipulated that we would return prior to closing with Three Rivers to make sure the board approved the financing recommendation for the project. As you know, throughout the process, there were a few title issues that came up. You've been kept apprised of those through committee. Three Rivers was able to successfully work their way through all of them, so that's great news, and they're proceeding to closing and would like us to close soon as well, hopefully in April. So we reviewed the capital finance account as part of the first quarter budget projection in the operations committee, where we reviewed some of the moving parts. I think principally what I'd outlined is that we're looking at expending $432,000 this year for this acquisition, and we have approximately $425,000 coming in the same time frame from the city of Victoria. As well, we have a cash balance in there to work with. So with those two transactions essentially being a wash and the existing balance, we're comfortable that we've got the financing necessary to proceed, and it's our recommendation to do so from the capital finance account, which is all summarized in Resolution 18022, which is before you tonight for consideration.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Olson, second by Manager Shepherdson. Any questions for Mr. Whisker? Manager Miller?
I think we all got an email today from somebody that suggests they had a better solution for the problem than, did anybody else get that?
Yes.
Okay.
I did not, I don't think.
Okay, maybe you could, they suggested that this could be better served by dredging the 6 Mile and Mud Lake, et cetera. Is somebody going to answer that?
If that gets forwarded to staff, we'll take care of it. That's Manager Miller, Chair White managers. That's sort of a recurring thread from a number of homeowners in the area that we're familiar with that have actually attended the Planning and Policy Committee in the past, have raised this issue to the board previously in writing. It's been addressed. We've met with those residents and their advisors a number of different times, and Anna Brown, our project manager, remains in contact with them. So if that's a new email or correspondence that we've received, staff can take care of that if we get a copy of it.
I have forwarded it just now from Mr. Burnett.
Thank you.
And
Any
I'm
other
doing the one I
questions,
said
Manager
I'd
Olson?
send as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I have the correspondence that's similar, talking about the work they're doing as a group that they sent to Commissioner Malushnik, and I said I'd forward that on.
Thank you. Anything else before we vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll now move to item 13.1, the Administrator's Report. You're first, Mr. Whisker.
Thank you, Chair White, managers. I have a brief 9-page administrator's report for you tonight. I was trying to do the math and the calculus on what kind of bar to set, and so that's what I came up with. I'm going to walk through a couple different categories of work here that's ongoing. Number one is it's approaching springtime in Minnesota, so we've got to think about the snow melt and potential rains and possible flooding, and so we're looking to our partners at the National Weather Service and NOAA to give us some flood prediction modeling. They issue predictive modeling for lake levels for Minnetonka based on snowpack and precipitation forecasts. That's what informs their operation of Grays Bay Dam and prevents communities from flooding downstream. Right now, they've issued a statewide forecast, not anything specific to the district. That'll come later, and you'll get briefed in the coming month from Tiffany Schaffler on that. The general forecast for the state is basically 50-50. It's going to be dependent on when the frost comes out and how big of a spring rain we get. Based on snowpack alone, there's no greater than 50-50 chance of statewide flooding. Right now, the lake's at 928.7, and we're predicting about 2 inches of water in the snow. So that would put you around 929 lake level, assuming no rains. Ordinary high for the lake's around 929.4, so we've got some room to work with based on our operations in the fall, and like I said, staff will provide updates as we go. On permits, I won't be here on March 22nd. But we've got a permit coming forward from the Metropolitan Council that's, I think, going to be noteworthy for the Lake Minnetonka area because it spans a number of different communities. Met Council is replacing force main down County Road 44, which runs through the lake on the east side of Halstead Bay. So that involves Hennepin County, Mound, Minnetrista, small portion of Victoria, connects to MnDOT, Three Rivers, and so there's an interceptor down there that they're replacing and doing some lift station work. And staff will be bringing that forward for permit consideration on the March 22nd meeting. Some partnership updates. Long Lake Waters, you know, they've been quite active and interested in having the district take its carp tracking and management model and work with them and the city of Orono, Medina, and Long Lake to do something similar in Long Lake. Eric Fieldsteth on staff put a tremendous amount of work into proposals that they keep coming up with and then modifying. Right now, the current working proposal is seeking $10,000 of support from each community and seems to be making its way with some success through all the city councils. Staff's evaluating our ability for in-kind contribution. We'd worked into the budget last year this concept that we'd put in some nets and do some in-kind work. And we're also looking at our ability to contribute some budgeted dollars, less than $10,000, for adding an aging study to their work to get more science and longer-term management planning out of that work. So you'll probably expect to hear something about that back in March or April from Eric. In meetings, I think we've been having a lot of meetings lately. Mike and Manager Miller braved the blizzard to attend the St. Louis Park City Council meeting. When was that, Monday? And the City Council voted to support the raising of the Louisiana Bridge, the low chord elevation over Minnehaha Creek. That's something that we've been working on for quite some time. I think of note is we originally included some capital dollars tentatively projected out into the future for that project, and so it's great that the city's moving that forward without need for our partnership at that time, because it affords for a potential trail connection underneath in the creek corridor connecting Methodist to the upstream greenway. So that's great news. In February, in that same neck of the woods along Minnehaha Creek, I had a meeting with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and we're having ongoing discussions, as you know, with Park Board staff regarding the advancement of Meadowbrook Golf Course. I'm meeting with them tomorrow, and we're looking to bring back the cooperative agreement that would allow us to advance something at Meadowbrook, ideally in May. On that note, Manager Miller and I met with Mayor Hovland recently, I think last week, of Edina to give him an update on Meadowbrook. They're keenly interested in seeing that connection happen, as is Three Rivers. So the city remains strongly in favor of that connection, and we've had some conversations with Three Rivers because it could connect down through the CP corridor, the Canada Pacific Rail corridor in Edina to City Hall, through to the 9 Mile Trail that's actually actively under construction in Edina, and then out to Highland Park Reserve. And we'd heard from Mayor Hovland that he's pretty pleased with how Arden Park is going, and that he's heard from a number of residents that appreciative, even though they're skeptical of the work, appreciate the work that Renee's been doing to engage them and continue to answer questions on an ongoing basis. Other meetings, I think Manager Olson and I are looking to schedule a meeting with Commissioner Malushnik sometime next week to provide an update on our 6 Mile Halstead Bay program. So we'll be talking about Wasserman West Park, downtown stormwater in Victoria, the CART program, or the Shallow Lake Restoration Program. We're going to bring up the topic of our bonding agreement, so we can get some action on that, and a few other things, probably Zumbra. And so on Zumbra Lake, as an update there, we're pretty actively engaged. We continue to receive a lot of communication, weekly, I would say, with concern and anticipation of the spring and high water conditions. And that's something that Commissioner Workman's extremely engaged on and reaching out periodically for updates. Where we stand on that is I feel like we've done a wholesale reset of our dynamic with the Zumbra Lake Association. We have a very productive, amicable working relationship right now that's founded in trust, and so we have a lot of open flow of information, and we're getting along much better. And they're asking Three Rivers to look at some maintenance work, dredging out a channel that might provide some relief and drainage through the system for them. The main issue for them is one of timing. They want it done yesterday, and Three Rivers in the city, and the partners have to follow, a public process if they're going to bring that project forward. So there's a quick update on Zumbra Lake for you. Let's see here. I'm going to skip some other things.
You've done all this in 8 days?
A lot of this has happened in the last week, yeah. Renee's been meeting in Wayzata with the city manager to discuss the pending release of the EAW. I know this is something President White's been tracking for the Lake Effect project, which is being published for comment on Monday. So the district's going to be providing some value to the city by coordinating the multi-agency regulatory review. So Renee will be bringing all the regulatory community together so that we can issue as a regulatory group streamlined comments so that the comments aren't necessarily in conflict with each other. That's something I think that the city will appreciate. Of course, I think the city manager brought up to Renee, even though we've made it clear, it's not a huge priority for investment from the district in any of those project elements at this time. They are looking at ways to make a request from us, whether it's through a future grant program or a capital improvement program. So that's something that we can probably expect to see sometime in the near future. For internally, in terms of program alignment, you received the strategic action plan at the board retreat, and that's something that's been rolled out to staff. So we're having a lot of discussion internally about priorities of those action steps. We can't do everything at once, and timelines and which teams will be advancing those work. And while I'm off sunning myself in Florida, Becky will be bringing that forward and walking you through the detail that's been filled out by staff to outline which teams are doing what and in what order and how that's getting routed through committee. And a neat thing that's happening as we have those conversations is how the work's starting to coalesce and watch programs work together. So coming out of our comprehensive plan, we've talked about developing a grant program, streamlining our regulations to make them more efficient and get greater natural resource benefit, but be easy to navigate for the development community. We've talked about developing a land use policy action plan, and we've also talked recently about rolling out our big science program, E-Grade. And so as part of this conversation, we're having with communication staff and all the programs, we're coming up with a concept of following a similar plan to what we followed previously with a comprehensive plan of community engagement. So 4 or 5 meetings over the next year and a half where our communities can engage simultaneously in providing feedback on grants, what we're doing with rules, our land use policy plan, so that we're not oversaturating the community on 15 different initiatives and having a lot of cross lines of communication. So a lot of that work's coming together, and it's fun to watch staff putting the pieces together. In terms of the land use action plan, that's probably top of our list in the strategic action plan, because we think there's a lot of room for positive action there. Kim LeBeau, our new staff in education, has been working under the direction of Becky and Renee to rough out a strategic plan for how we can achieve our land use water policy goals. So how we get integrated into road CIPs or park master plans or development plans as they're coming through the sketch plan review process. And this will be the first piece of work that we're going to have the Citizens Advisory Committee sink their teeth into. So at the next CAC meeting, which I'm not quite sure when that is, I think it's
March 14th.
Next week. So next week at the Citizens Advisory Committee, they're going to have a brainstorming session and really kind of sink their teeth into what this land use policy plan means and give us a bunch of ideas. Staff will refine those, and then that'll come forward through the Planning and Policy Committee in April and May, so we can develop a plan that'll further inform our 2019 budget. The last piece on the land use front, and as part of that plan, Renee, as a resident of the district, and she's not here, and as a staff member of the district, has been appointed to the Met Council's Land Use Advisory Committee, which is something that we actively sought out on staff. They're going to be meeting bi-monthly, and they provide advice to the council on regional land use and comprehensive planning. So this is going to be a great opportunity to take what we're doing in Victoria with their Western Growth Area and integrating natural resources and green printing into land use plans and actually advise the Met Council directly on how watersheds are instrumental in regional and land use planning. So we're excited about that. I gave you an update on HR, so I'm not going to do that again. And in terms of basic operations on March, again, when I'm not here, it sounds like a lot is going to be happening. We'll be bringing forward a request for qualifications for professional services for both legal counsel and engineering, which is something that we do on a pretty routine basis. So you can expect to see that. And I think that's all I have, other than to just take a moment and acknowledge and thank our former administrator, Lars, for all of his work during his time at the district to get us from, I think, where we were several years ago to where we are today. I think he really helped position us well for a lot of future success. And I think we all appreciate his work and look forward to seeing him at our future alumni events. That was one of his big requests of staff before he said his farewells and made his rounds around the office as he stopped by Tiffany's Cube and made sure he got on our alumni distribution list, because we do a lot of gatherings. And of course, I wanted to express my sincere thanks to the board for providing me with the distinct honor and privilege of continuing my service for Minnehaha Creek Watershed District in this new role of district administrator. Hopefully you know I don't take the opportunity lightly or for granted, and I realize that the organization set some extremely ambitious goals. Some of those make me nervous, but I think that's good. And I think we're uniquely positioned to accomplish them and many other great things. And I think that's for two reasons. One, the board and the vision of this board. And what I see the board's made clear is that we're not here to plod along at a moderate pace and be content doing good or great work, but rather we're about setting the highest possible standard of excellence and then working like heck to achieve it. So I think that's a huge piece of why we're poised for greatness. And the second is obviously our talented, passionate, and dedicated staff. We had a conversation at a recent staff meeting about how achieving that standard of excellence is hard and it's difficult work. But we've got a group here that knows that hard work works, and they understand that difficulty and discomfort is just a sign that we're pursuing something worth all of our collective efforts. And it's going to be my pleasure to work in service of a really energetic, driven, and capable group of people. And I think, as the saying goes, if you choose a job you love, you never have to do a day of work in your life. And I find myself extremely grateful and fortunate enough to be in a position where I'm not working to make a living, but working to make a difference. So I crammed as many cliches as possible in there. But that's what I have to say. I just want to thank everybody for this amazing opportunity. I really look forward to many years of partnership and success with the board and the staff and our member community. So thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Is that the